My name is Joshua. I am 54 years old. I am standing in front of a church in California wearing a gray suit that I saved 3 months of wages to buy. Today is my daughter Emma's wedding day. In my hand, I am holding a small velvet box containing my mother's pearl necklace, a treasure I have kept for 28 years waiting for this moment. I drove 12 hours straight from Ohio to be here. I believe today will change everything between us. But when I walk through the gate, a woman from the wedding party looks at me with strange eyes, like she knows something I do not. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you believe that a father's love never dies, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me tell you what happened when I stepped inside that church. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the son of a car mechanic and a homemaker. My father was a quiet man who taught me that being a man is not about how much money you make, but about never abandoning the people who depend on you. He died when I was 17 years old, leaving me to take care of my mother and 2 younger sisters. I dropped out of college and started working at the local steel mill. That decision shaped the rest of my life. I worked double shifts, took overtime whenever it was offered, and learned to live on very little sleep. My hands became rough. My back started aching before I turned 30, but I never complained. I was doing what my father would have done. I was providing for my family. When I was 24 years old, I met Linda at a county fair. She was standing by the cotton candy booth laughing at something her friend said, and the way the evening light caught her hair made me forget how to breathe for a moment. She came from a family with more money than mine, people who lived in a 2-story house with a lawn that someone else mowed. Her mother never approved of me. She said I was not good enough for her daughter, that I would never amount to anything. But Linda said she loved me, and back then that was enough. We got married after 2 years of dating. The wedding was small because I could not afford anything fancy, but Linda said she did not care. She said all she needed was me. I believed her. When I was 30 years old, Emma was born. I remember holding her for the first time in that hospital room, looking down at her tiny face, her eyes barely open, her fingers so small they could barely wrap around my thumb. I made a promise to her that day. I promised I would give her everything I never had. I promised I would work harder than any man alive to make sure she had a good life. And I kept that promise. I took extra shifts at the mill. I picked up side jobs on weekends, fixing cars like my father taught me, doing construction work, anything that paid. I missed some of Emma's school plays. I missed a few birthday parties. But every night, no matter how late I came home, I would walk into her room and kiss her forehead while she slept. I thought she understood. I thought she knew that every hour I spent away from her was an hour I spent working for her future. There were good times too. On Sunday mornings when I did not have to work, Emma and I would make pancakes together. She would stand on a little stool next to me, stirring the batter with a wooden spoon, getting flour all over her pajamas. We would eat those pancakes with too much syrup and watch cartoons until Linda told us to clean up the kitchen. I took her fishing at the lake near our house. She was not very good at it, and neither was I, but we would sit there for hours talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her friends at school, about the boy who pulled her hair, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, because she loved animals so much. One night when she was about 8 years old, I was reading her a bedtime story. It was something about a princess and a dragon. I do not remember exactly. When I finished, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to marry someone just like you." I carried those words in my heart for years. They were my treasure, my reminder of why I worked so hard, why I endured the exhaustion and the aching muscles and the missed moments. I was building a life for my little girl, and she loved me for it. At least that is what I believed. When Emma was around 10 years old, things started to change at home. Linda began complaining that I was never around, that I cared more about work than about my family. I tried to explain that everything I did was for them, that the overtime and the side jobs were the only way we could afford the house, the car, Emma's school supplies. But Linda did not want to hear it. She said I was absent, that I was missing our daughter's childhood. The arguments became more frequent. The silences between us grew longer. Her mother started visiting more often. Every time she came, the atmosphere in the house turned cold. She would make little comments about my job, about the neighborhood we lived in, about how her daughter deserved better. I tried to ignore it, but I could see it was affecting Linda. She started looking at me differently, like I was a disappointment she had learned to tolerate. I did not know it then, but the foundation of my family was already cracking, and soon it would shatter completely. When Emma was 14 years old, my world fell apart. I came home early one afternoon because the mill had closed for emergency repairs. I walked into my own house and found my wife in the arms of another man. His name was Victor. He was a lawyer, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Linda had met him through her job at a real estate agency. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom watching them, and for a moment I could not move. It was like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Linda did not even have the decency to look ashamed. She just looked at me and said I was going to tell you. I did not yell. I did not throw things. I just walked out of the room, went to the backyard, and sat on the old bench where Emma and I used to watch fireflies in the summer. I sat there until the sun went down, trying to understand how I had failed so completely. When I finally went back inside, I asked Linda if we could talk. I told her I was willing to go to marriage counseling, that I would try to be home more, that I would do whatever it took to save our family. She looked at me like I was a stranger and said, "I do not love you anymore, Joshua. I have not loved you for a long time. Victor can give me the life I deserve. You are just a factory worker. You will never be anything more than that." Those words cut deeper than any knife. I had spent 15 years breaking my body to provide for this woman, and she looked at me like I was nothing. The divorce was brutal. Linda hired an expensive lawyer paid for by Victor, while I could barely afford to hire anyone at all. She fought for full custody of Emma, claiming that my work schedule made me an unfit parent. She had witnesses, carefully chosen friends, who testified that I was never home, that I did not participate in Emma's life. It did not matter that I had worked so hard precisely because I wanted to give Emma a better life. The court only saw a father who was absent. I will never forget the day the judge announced the verdict. Linda got full custody. I was granted visitation rights for 2 weekends a month. I looked at Emma sitting next to her mother, her eyes red from crying, and I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her that none of this was her fault. But Linda grabbed her hand and led her out of the courtroom before I could say a word. That night, I sat alone in the house that suddenly felt enormous. I walked into Emma's room and looked at her empty bed, her stuffed animals lined up on the shelf, her drawings still taped to the wall. And I cried. I cried like I had not cried since my father died. I cried for my daughter, for my marriage, for the life I thought I was building that had crumbled to dust. The months that followed were a slow torture. I tried to maintain my relationship with Emma. Every other weekend, I would drive to pick her up, but Linda always had an excuse. Emma is sick. Emma has a test to study for. Emma is at a friend's birthday party. The weekends I was supposed to have with my daughter became fewer and fewer, until they almost disappeared entirely. When I called, Emma's voice grew more distant each time. She gave me one-word answers. She said she was busy. She said she had to go. I could feel her slipping away from me, but I did not know how to stop it. When Emma was 16, Linda married Victor. They moved into a big house in a wealthy neighborhood. Victor bought Emma a brand new car for her birthday. He bought her designer clothes and the latest phone. He took her on vacations to places I could never afford. And Linda's mother, that woman who had always looked down on me, finally had the son-in-law she thought her daughter deserved. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Linda and her mother were telling Emma stories about me. They told her I had abandoned the family, that I chose work over her, that I never really cared. They painted Victor as the hero who stepped in to save them from the mess I had made. When Emma was 17, she stopped calling me Dad. She started calling me Joshua, like I was a stranger she barely knew. When I asked her why, she said, "Mom told me everything. You were never there for us. Victor is more of a father than you ever were." I tried to explain. I tried to tell her about the overtime shifts, the side jobs, the sacrifices I made so she could have a good education. But she did not want to hear it. She had been fed a different story for years, and that story had become her truth. I was losing my daughter, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. When Emma turned 18, she left for college in California. Victor paid for everything: the tuition, the apartment, the new laptop, all of it. I offered to help, but Emma did not even respond to my message. A few weeks after she left, I discovered that she had blocked my phone number. I tried calling from different phones, but she never answered. I sent emails that went unanswered. I wrote letters by hand, pouring my heart onto paper, and mailed them to her apartment. Every single one came back with the same stamp: return to sender. Every year on her birthday, I sent a gift: a nice watch when she turned 19, a leather journal when she turned 20, a framed photograph of us at the lake when she was 7. Every gift was returned unopened. I drove to California 3 times in those 4 years. The first time, I showed up at her apartment building and waited outside for 6 hours. When she finally came out, she saw me standing there, and her face turned to stone. She said, "What are you doing here? I do not want to see you." Then she walked past me like I was invisible. The second time, I tried to approach her on her college campus. She was with a group of friends laughing about something. When she saw me, the laughter stopped. She said something to her friends, and they all walked away together, leaving me standing alone on the sidewalk. The third time, I did not even try to talk to her. I just sat in my car across the street from her apartment building, watching the lights in her window, wondering what she was doing, who she was becoming, what kind of person she was growing into without me. I sat there until 3 in the morning, then drove the 12 hours back to Ohio without sleeping. At home, I kept Emma's room exactly as she had left it. Her bed was still made with the purple comforter she had chosen when she was 12. Her old stuffed animals still sat on the shelf. Sometimes late at night, I would sit in that room and look at the photographs on the wall. Emma at her 5th birthday party. Emma at her 8th grade graduation. Emma and me at the lake holding up a fish that was so small we threw it back. I talked to those photographs sometimes. I told them about my day, about the weather, about the new supervisor at the mill. I told them how much I missed her. My friend Raymond told me I needed to let go. He said, "She made her choice, Josh. You cannot force someone to love you." But I could not accept that. She was my daughter. A father does not give up on his child. My health started to decline during those years. The stress, the grief, the loneliness, they all took their toll. The doctor told me I had high blood pressure and early signs of heart disease. He said I needed to reduce stress, exercise more, eat better. I nodded and said I would try. But how do you reduce stress when your heart is broken in a way that no medicine can fix? I spent most of my evenings sitting alone on the porch of my house, watching the sun go down, thinking about Emma. The neighbors probably thought I was going crazy. Maybe I was. Then 4 years after Emma stopped talking to me, something unexpected happened. I had moved to a smaller apartment because I could not afford the house anymore, and the new owners had agreed to forward any mail that arrived for me. One day a letter came. It was a wedding invitation. Emma was getting married, and my name was on the invitation. I read it over and over, my hands, shaking, tears streaming down my face. She had invited me. After all these years of silence, she had invited me to her wedding. Maybe she was ready to forgive. Maybe she wanted to start over. Maybe there was still hope for us. I did not know that the invitation had been sent by Emma's aunt Martha, Linda's sister, without Emma's knowledge. I did not know that Emma had no idea I would be coming. All I knew was that I had a chance, and I was not going to waste it. I spent 3 months preparing for that wedding. I did not have much money saved, but I put aside every dollar I could spare. I wanted to look respectable, like a father who deserved to be at his daughter's wedding. I went to a department store and tried on suits for the first time in years. The salesman, a young guy with too much gel in his hair, helped me find a charcoal gray suit that fit well. He said the color was classic, that it would work for any occasion. I remembered that Emma once told me gray was a good color on me back when she still talked to me about things like that. The suit cost more than I usually spent on clothes in an entire year, but I did not care. This was the most important day of my life. I also brought out the small velvet box that I had kept in my dresser for 28 years. Inside was my mother's pearl necklace. She had given it to me before she died when Emma was just a baby. She said, "Give this to your daughter on her wedding day. Tell her it belonged to a woman who loved her family more than anything in the world." I had been saving that necklace for this moment. I hoped Emma would accept it. I hoped it would mean something to her. The drive from Ohio to California took 12 hours. I left at 4 in the morning, so I would arrive with plenty of time to spare. I did not stop to sleep. I was too anxious, too excited, too full of hope to close my eyes. As I drove through the desert, I practiced what I would say to Emma. I tried different versions. Formal ones, casual ones, emotional ones. Nothing sounded right. Finally, I decided I would just speak from the heart. I would tell her I loved her, that I had always loved her, that I was sorry for whatever she thought I had done wrong. I would ask for a chance to be part of her life again. I stopped at a small flower shop in rural Nevada to buy a bouquet. The shop was run by an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes. When I told her I was going to my daughter's wedding, she smiled and said, "She is lucky to have a father who loves her so much." I chose white peonies because they were Emma's favorite flower when she was a little girl. She used to pick them from our neighbor's garden and bring them to me saying, "These are for you, Daddy." I arrived in California on the morning of the wedding. I found a cheap motel near the church and paid for a room just to shower and change. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a man who looked older than his years. My hair had turned mostly gray. There were deep lines around my eyes, but I straightened my tie and told myself that none of that mattered. Today, I was going to see my daughter. I arrived at the church an hour early. It was a beautiful building, white stone with tall windows surrounded by gardens full of flowers. Expensive cars were already pulling into the parking lot, guests in elegant clothes stepping out, laughing and greeting each other. I did not recognize anyone. I stood near the entrance, holding my bouquet of peonies and the velvet box with my mother's necklace. People walked past me without a second glance. I felt out of place, like a stain on a white tablecloth. But I reminded myself that I had every right to be here. I was the father of the bride. Then I saw a familiar face. Martha, Emma's aunt, was hurrying toward me with a worried expression. She grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. "Joshua," she said, "I did not think you would actually come. Emma does not know I sent that invitation. She did not invite you." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked. Martha looked around nervously. "Linda and Victor told Emma not to invite you. They said you would cause a scene, that you would ruin her day. I thought it was wrong, so I sent the invitation myself. But Emma does not know you are here. This could be bad, Joshua. This could be very bad." I stood there processing her words. My daughter had not invited me. The one ray of hope I had clung to for months was a lie. But I had come all this way. I had prepared for this moment for so long. I could not leave now. "I need to see her," I said. "Even if just for a moment. I need her to know I came." Martha shook her head sadly, but did not try to stop me. I walked through the church doors, found a seat in the back row, and waited. The church filled with guests. I saw Victor near the altar, shaking hands with important-looking people, laughing at their jokes. I saw Linda in the front row, beautiful in a blue dress, looking every bit the proud mother of the bride. And then the music started, and everyone stood up, and I saw Emma. She was wearing a white wedding gown that made her look like an angel. Her hair was done up with tiny flowers woven through it. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, and she was walking down the aisle on Victor's arm. Emma walked slowly down the aisle, her hand resting on Victor's arm, her face glowing with happiness. I watched from my seat in the back, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was my daughter, my little girl who used to make pancakes with me on Sunday mornings. My little girl who wanted to marry someone just like me. She was almost at the altar when her eyes swept across the guests, and then they stopped. On me. For a moment, everything froze. The music kept playing, but Emma had stopped walking. Victor looked at her with concern, then followed her gaze to where I was sitting. His expression changed from confusion to anger in an instant. Emma said something to Victor, too quiet for me to hear. Then she let go of his arm and started walking toward me. The guests turned in their seats, murmuring, trying to figure out what was happening. She stopped in front of my pew. Her face, which had been so radiant moments ago, was now cold as ice. "Dad," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "you are not invited. Go away." The words hit me like a physical blow. I struggled to my feet, the bouquet of peonies trembling in my hands. "Emma, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking. "I just wanted to see you on your special day. I came all the way from Ohio. I brought you something, a gift from your grandmother." She did not even look at the velvet box I was holding out to her. She just stared at me with eyes full of contempt. "You lost the right to call me sweetheart years ago," she said. "You were never there for me. You chose your job over your family. You abandoned us. Victor is the one who raised me. He is the one who was there for my graduations, my birthdays, my life. He is walking me down the aisle, not you." The church had gone completely silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, judging me, pitying me, some of them probably enjoying the spectacle. I saw Linda in the front row, a small smile playing on her lips. I saw Victor walking toward us, his face a mask of false concern. "Emma, please," I said. "I worked every day to give you a better life. I never stopped loving you. I sent gifts every year. I called, I wrote letters, uninvited, trying to ruin the happiest day. Uninvited, trying to ruin the happiest day of my life." Victor reached us and put his hand on Emma's shoulder. "I think it is time for you to leave," he said to me, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are upsetting my daughter on her wedding day." I looked into Victor's eyes and saw triumph there. This was the man who had taken everything from me. My wife, my daughter, my place in my own family. And now he was standing here in front of all these people, savoring my humiliation. Martha tried to intervene. She stepped forward and said, "Emma, please. He is your father. At least let him stay and watch." Emma turned on her aunt with fury in her eyes. "You invited him," she said. "How could you do this to me, Aunt Martha? How could you ruin my wedding like this?" Martha shrank back, unable to respond. I looked at my daughter one last time. I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to tell her about all the years I had worked to give her a better life. I wanted to tell her about the nights I sat in her empty room talking to her photographs. I wanted to tell her that I had never stopped loving her, not for a single moment. But the words would not come. My throat was closed with grief. All I could manage was a single sentence. "I love you, Emma. I always have. I always will." Then I turned and walked out of the church. Each step felt like I was walking through water. The bouquet of peonies fell from my hands somewhere along the way. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the sunlight. Behind me, I heard the murmuring of the guests resume. I heard the music start again. I heard applause as Emma continued down the aisle to marry a man I had never met, escorted by a man who had stolen my family. I walked to the stone steps outside the church and sat down. I looked at the velvet box still clutched in my hand, the pearl necklace inside that my mother had wanted Emma to have. I had carried it for 28 years, waiting for this day. The sounds of the wedding ceremony drifted through the closed doors. Music, laughter, the voice of the officiant. My daughter was getting married, and I was sitting outside alone like a beggar turned away from a feast. I put my face in my hands and let the tears come. I had been humiliated before. I had been hurt before. But this was something different. This was my own child, my own flesh and blood, looking at me with hatred in her eyes and telling me I did not belong in her life. For a long time, I just sat there broken. But somewhere deep inside me, beneath all the pain and the shame, there was a small flame that refused to go out. I do not know how long I sat on those church steps. It could have been minutes or hours. The sun moved across the sky. The sounds of the ceremony inside gave way to cheers and applause, then to the noise of guests leaving cars, starting people calling out congratulations. I watched them go. Well-dressed strangers laughing and happy heading off to celebrate my daughter's new life. None of them gave me a second look. I was invisible. When the church was finally quiet, I stood up on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I walked to my car, got in, and sat behind the wheel without turning on the engine. I stared at the church building, at the flowers in the garden, at the spot where Emma had told me to go away. And then something shifted inside me. For 20 years, I had defined myself by my family. I was Linda's husband. I was Emma's father. I was the provider, the protector, the man who sacrificed everything so the people he loved could have better lives. But Linda had left me for someone richer. Emma had chosen a stranger over me. All those years of sacrifice, all that love, and what did I have to show for it? A broken heart and a seat outside the church while my daughter got married. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I saw a tired man, a defeated man, a man who had been running after approval his whole life. And I asked myself a question I had never asked before. When is it enough? When do you stop trying to prove yourself to people who will never appreciate you? When do you stop begging for love from people who have already decided you are worthless? I thought about my father. He was a simple man, a mechanic who worked with his hands and came home smelling like engine oil. He never made much money. He never lived in a fancy house or drove an expensive car. But he was proud of who he was. He never apologized for being a working man. He never felt ashamed of what he could not provide. I realized that I had spent decades feeling ashamed. Ashamed that I was not rich enough for Linda. Ashamed that I could not give Emma everything Victor could. Ashamed of my calloused hands and my aching back and my small apartment in Ohio. But what had I done wrong? I had worked honestly. I had loved deeply. I had tried my best to be a good father. If that was not enough for them, then maybe the problem was not with me. I got out of the car and walked to a small park across the street from the church. There was a bench under an old oak tree, and I sat down and watched the leaves move in the breeze. I stayed there until the sun started to set, thinking about my life, about my choices, about who I wanted to be from this point forward. I decided that I was done being a victim. I was done letting other people's opinions determine my worth. I was done waiting for Emma to love me back. Instead of driving straight back to Ohio, I stayed in California for a few more days. I went to Santa Monica Beach and sat on the sand watching the waves crash against the shore. I ate at a small diner where nobody knew me, and nobody cared about my story. I walked through the streets of Los Angeles, just another anonymous person in a city of millions. It felt strange at first, this freedom from expectation. For so long, every decision I made had been about someone else. What would Linda think? What does Emma need? Now, for the first time in decades, I was thinking only about myself. I bought a notebook at a drugstore and started writing. I wrote about my childhood, about my father, about meeting Linda, about Emma's birth. I wrote about the divorce, the custody battle, the years of rejection. And then I wrote something else. I wrote a letter to Emma. Not a letter begging for forgiveness. Not a letter asking her to take me back. Just a letter telling the truth. I told her about the overtime shifts I worked to pay for her school clothes. I told her about the times I came to pick her up and was turned away with excuses. I told her about the gifts I sent every year that were returned unopened. I told her about the letters I wrote that she never received. I wrote, "I am not asking you to forgive me because I have done nothing that needs forgiveness. I am just asking you to know the truth. Someday, when you are ready to hear it, I will be here. But I will not spend the rest of my life begging for your love. I deserve better than that. And so do you." I put the letter in an envelope along with my mother's pearl necklace. I addressed it to Emma and mailed it before I could change my mind. Then I drove back to Ohio. When I got home, I started making changes. I went to the doctor and finally took my health seriously. I started walking every morning, then jogging, then running. I changed my diet. I quit drinking beer every night and started drinking water instead. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center. It was something I had always wanted to try, and I figured there was no better time than now. The instructor was a retired carpenter named George who had hands even more calloused than mine. He taught me how to choose the right wood, how to use a lathe, how to sand and polish, until the grain showed through like artwork. I started talking to my neighbors. There was a widow named Dorothy who lived 2 houses down. She baked cookies and brought them over one afternoon, and we ended up talking for 3 hours about our lives, our losses, our hopes for whatever time we had left. There was a young couple across the street with a baby who cried all night. I offered to help them fix their broken fence, and they invited me for dinner to say thank you. I joined a support group at my church for men who had gone through divorce or lost contact with their children. We met every Thursday night in the church basement, drinking bad coffee and sharing our stories. I realized I was not alone. There were other fathers out there who had been pushed out of their families, who had been lied about and forgotten. We helped each other heal. A few weeks after the wedding, I received a phone call from Martha. She told me what had happened after I left the church. Apparently, some of the guests had asked about the man who was turned away. They wanted to know who I was, why I was there, why Emma had reacted so strongly. The questions had planted seeds of doubt. Martha said people are starting to wonder if the story they have been told about you is true. Even some of Linda's friends are questioning it. The truth has a way of coming out, Joshua. I thanked her for calling, but I told her I was no longer interested in proving myself to anyone. If Emma wanted to know the truth, she could find it. But I was not going to spend another day chasing after people who did not want me. 6 months after the wedding, I received another unexpected phone call. This time it was from a man named Daniel, Emma's husband. I had never spoken to him before. He said, "Mr. Joshua, I found some old letters and documents in a box that Linda gave Emma. They were supposed to be thrown away, but I looked through them first. There are letters from you, dozens of them. There are receipts for gifts that were returned. There are phone records showing how many times you called. I think Emma needs to see these. I think she needs to know the truth." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Tell her the truth. That is all I have ever wanted. But I am not going to force myself into her life anymore. If she wants to talk to me, she knows where I am." Daniel said he understood. He said he would show Emma what he had found. He said he was sorry for what his wife had done to me at the wedding. I thanked him and hung up. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Tired of the whole long saga, tired of the pain, tired of waiting for a resolution that might never come. But I also felt something else. I felt at peace. For the first time in years, I was not waiting for someone else to make me whole. I was already whole just as I was. 1 year passed after the wedding. I built a new life for myself during that time, piece by piece, day by day. I finished my woodworking class and started making small furniture pieces that I sold at the local farmer's market. Nothing fancy, just cutting boards and picture frames and little jewelry boxes, but people seemed to like them. There was something satisfying about creating things with my own hands, about turning raw wood into something beautiful and useful. I had friends now, real friends who knew my story and did not judge me for it. Dorothy became like a sister to me. We had dinner together twice a week, and she taught me how to make her famous apple pie. The men from my support group became brothers. We went fishing together, watched football together, helped each other through the hard days. My health improved dramatically. I lost 30 pounds. My blood pressure went down. My doctor said I had added years to my life. I started to feel strong again, capable like the man I used to be before everything fell apart. I still thought about Emma every day. I wondered if Daniel had shown her the letters, if she had read them, if they had changed anything. But I did not reach out to her. I had said everything I needed to say in my letter. The next move was hers. Then one autumn afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and found Emma standing on my porch. She looked different from the confident, cold woman who had sent me away from her wedding. She was thinner. There were shadows under her eyes. She was holding something in her hands, and when I looked closer, I saw it was my mother's pearl necklace and the letter I had written. I read everything she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel showed me the box of letters and gifts. I saw all of them, Dad. Every letter you wrote. Every present you sent. They were all there, hidden away, returned to you without my knowledge." She started crying. "I did not know," she said. "Mom told me you never tried to contact me. She told me you did not care. She told me you abandoned us. I believed her. I believed every word, and I treated you like a monster when you were the one who never stopped trying. I did not know what to say. I stood there in the doorway looking at my daughter, seeing the little girl who used to make pancakes with me buried somewhere inside this broken woman. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into the living room and looked around at my small apartment, at the furniture I had made, at the photographs on the wall. There was one of her from her 5th birthday, wearing a paper crown and grinning at the camera. She stared at it for a long time. We sat down in the living room, and she told me everything. She told me about the lies Linda and Victor had fed her for years. She told me about the way her grandmother had poisoned her against me. She told me about the guilt she felt now, looking back at all the times she had rejected my calls, all the letters she had returned without opening, all the years she had wasted, being angry at a man who had done nothing wrong. I listened without interrupting. I let her talk until she had nothing left to say. Then she looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "I am so sorry, Dad. I said terrible things to you. I humiliated you in front of everyone. How can you ever forgive me?" I reached out and took her hand. I said, "You are my daughter. You will always be my daughter. There is nothing to forgive. I am just glad you are here." She broke down completely, then sobbing into her hands like a child. I moved to sit beside her and put my arm around her shoulders. I held her the way I used to hold her when she was little, when she had a nightmare or scraped her knee. I held her and let her cry. We talked for hours that day. I told her my side of the story, all of it from the beginning. I did not attack Linda or Victor. I did not try to make her hate them. I just told the truth, simply and plainly, and let her draw her own conclusions. She asked me questions I had never expected her to ask. She wanted to know about her grandparents, about what I was like when I was young, about how I felt the day she was born. I answered every question as honestly as I could. By the time she left that evening, something had shifted between us. The wall that had stood for so many years had developed a crack. It was not much, but it was a start. Our relationship did not heal overnight. There were still wounds that needed time to close. Emma lived in California with Daniel, and we could not see each other as often as I would have liked. But we talked on the phone every week. We exchanged text messages. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild what had been destroyed. I learned to let go of the anger I had carried for so long. It was not easy. There were days when I thought about Linda and Victor and the years they had stolen from me, and my blood would boil. But I realized that holding on to that rage was only hurting myself. They had already taken so much from me. I was not going to let them take my peace as well. I learned that forgiveness is not about excusing what someone did. It is not about saying their actions were acceptable. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. It is about choosing to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. It is perhaps the hardest thing a person can do, but it is also the most liberating. I continued building my new life. I expanded my woodworking business and started getting custom orders. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see: Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, the coast of Maine. I lived each day as fully as I could, grateful for the second chance I had been given. One autumn evening, about 2 years after Emma came back into my life, I was sitting on the porch of my apartment watching the leaves fall. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emma. "Dad, Daniel and I are expecting. It is a girl. I want to name her after Grandma." What do you think? I sat there for a long moment reading those words over and over. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. For the first time in longer than I could remember, they were tears of joy. I typed back, "She would have loved that. I would have loved that. Congratulations, sweetheart. I am so proud of you." I put down the phone and looked up at the evening sky. The first stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, I like to think my mother and father were watching. They would have been happy to know that their granddaughter was going to have a baby, that their family line would continue, that, despite everything, love had found a way. I want to share something with you, whoever is listening to this story. If you are a father who feels forgotten, if you have been pushed away by the people you love, I want you to know this: your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Keep being the person you know you are. The truth has a way of coming out, even if it takes years. And even if it never does, you can still live a life of dignity and peace. Because at the end of the day, the only person you have to answer to is the one you see in the mirror. Sometimes the people we love the most hurt us the deepest. But that does not mean love is wrong. It means love is real. And real love, like real truth, can survive anything. Even time, even silence, even a daughter telling you to go away at her own wedding. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever been hurt by someone you loved deeply? Have you ever felt like giving up on a relationship that mattered to you? Or maybe you are on the other side and you have hurt someone who did not deserve it. Whatever your story is, I would love to hear it in the comments below. If this story touched your heart,